Hey, Legal Rebels, this is Tom Martin. I'm the founder of LawDroid, and this is my podcast, LawDroid Manifesto, where I interview legal innovators about how they do what they do.
In this episode, I interview Dan Lear, VP of Partnerships at InfoTrack and former Director of Industry Relations at Avvo, whose unconventional journey from a family of lawyers to legal technology pioneer demonstrates how stepping off the beaten path can lead to meaningful innovation and impact. Welcome to the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. I'm Tom Martin, your host, and today I'm excited to have a good friend on who I've known for years, and I haven't gotten into his backstory and origin story, which we're going to get into today and share for the benefit of you, the audience. His name is Dan Lear, and he is the VP of Partnerships at InfoTrack and also an advisor to Off the Record. He has an incredible career and a lot to talk about and teach us about, also get into how it all started. So with that, Dan, I'd like to introduce you and where are you at now and what you up to?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. And yeah, it is super fun. You and I have known each other for a really long time, but never talked about this stuff in detail. So I'm excited to, as I said to you when we were chatting about kind of doing this, who doesn't love to talk about themselves? So I can do that ad nauseum, and my family doesn't like to listen to me do it. So so it's great that there's at least one person in the world that wants to hear from me. I guess currently I am, I'm a licensed attorney, although I don't practice law really too much anymore. Based in Seattle, Washington, so just down the road from you in DC. Lived here for about 20 years, been licensed for about since 2008. So I don't know, what is that? 17 years. But yeah, head up partnerships at InfoTrack. I've been working in the legal technology sector for a little bit more formally for a little bit more than a decade. Have a lot of passion around this space. I think it's a super interesting and fun place to work. And yeah, I love talking about it. So excited to be with you all and share hopefully what little wisdom I have.
Well, there's a lot and a lot to unpack. But what's the role at Off the Record?
Yeah, so they are a platform that helps connect drivers with lawyers to fight their traffic tickets. Started by a couple of Amazon engineers in 2015. So met them just by the good fortune of sort of being based here and them having some questions. I kind of helped them very informally while I was still at Avvo. And then when I left Avvo, took kind of a more robust role with them, helping them grow. So I've done everything there from kind of partnerships to business development to even a little bit of sales. I nominally function as, it's still a fairly small company, but I nominally function as their general counsel. So helping them sort of run regulatory traps and deal with legal issues. It aligned fairly closely and still does align quite closely with a lot of the work that I was doing at Avvo. So I like to joke for them, I was a little bit like the Liam Neeson character in Taken. Like I was a man with a very particular set of skills. A lot of the stuff that we had been thinking about and doing at Avvo aligned really nicely with some of the needs that they had. And so I've been able to help them out for quite some time.
Yeah, Avvo is how I came to know you, back in the day. When I was still just focusing on running my practice, there's these cool events that came up. I was on the directory and I was answering questions and doing all that good stuff. And then became aware of your conferences. And, I think I had been to Seattle like once or twice, but flew up for the conference. And it was just, for me at the time, I don't know if it was like 2015 or something, maybe. It was just eye-opening because it was a completely like different mental frame of looking at what we do as lawyers, and looking at it from a much more, I wouldn't necessarily say data-driven at the time. It's just like the mental framework was just more organized in a way. Like it was more business-like in many ways.
Yeah.
That was definitely new to me at the time, and saw you there, heard you speak, and it was very, very impressive. And so I started following you ever since then. And, I love every time I get to hear you speak because you're Just so you all know that are watching, like Dan has a real gift of engagement, a real gift of gab, and like grabbing people's attention, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks, Tom.
I would love to get into your backstory a little bit, understand your roots and how you came up. You're in Seattle now, as you mentioned. Have you been there your whole life? Did you grow up there?
I was actually born and raised in Salt Lake City, Utah. I am the child of two attorneys, lots of attorneys in my greater family as well. My grandfather on my mom's side, her dad is an attorney. Each of my parents both have one brother. They're both attorneys. My brother's a lawyer. I got a cousin who's a lawyer. There actually is a law firm in Salt Lake City, Utah called Lear and Lear. It's my father's and my uncle's firm. So like my parents really pushed law school, but neither of them are very traditional lawyers. My dad was really more of an entrepreneur, initially involved with real estate development, and then has kind of spent 20 years in this kind of really interesting kind of environmental kind of conservation role that he basically sort of invented for himself. And then my mom was actually a teacher before she went to law school. And then she worked for 20 years for the Utah State Office of Education in this sort of really interesting sort of regulatory legal role. So as much as my folks sort of pushed this, it was even a little bit frustrating when I graduated from law school because I was like, I want to go do like what like do interesting things like my parents are doing, but like, the law school path pushes you down a fairly narrow set of paths. So it was probably inevitable that I would end up sort of carving out, I don't know if it's a good path, but a unique path or a different path because of what I'd seen. I think it was inevitable that I'd end up doing something in this space.
Well, there's usually two camps of people that I talk to. Like on the one hand, there are those that from like an early age know that they want to go to law school, become a lawyer. There's others who are like, I got this degree and I need to make money somehow, so why not go to law school?
Totally.
But it sounds like you're probably more in the former camp, from the influence of your family.
Yeah, but again, it's so interesting because, and again, my mother was an English teacher. So, and I don't know, maybe we're just a really verbose family, kind of communicating clearly, communicating effectively, even advocacy to some extent was just like the air that I grew up breathing, right? Like I've gotten feedback that sometimes I sound very convicted in the things that I say, but I think that's just because that was sort of how I was taught to kind of communicate.
Hmm.
But then when it came to like what you do for work, like neither, it's fun. And this is a much longer conversation, probably not that value. Both of my parents have sort of ended up in more traditional practice settings toward the ends of their career, but all growing up watching them work. Like the notion of billable hours and all that, like it was just a much more sort of entrepreneurial, non-traditional kind of background. And that was the way my parents just even thought about the world too. They had wide interests and they were, talking about a lot of things. We discussed a lot of different things in growing up. And so again, I think and I'm an oldest child and I guess I'm a little bit of a people pleaser. So there was like, no, it was like, well, I have to, because that's the expectation. There's a comedian that I love, whose name is Dimitri Martin. He's like relatively famous.
Yeah.
If you saw his face, you'd probably. So the story on Dimitri Martin is that he was in law school. He went to NYU. I think he even had a scholarship. Super smart guy. I think he did like undergrad at Princeton. Growing up, people would ask him, what do you want to do when you grow up, Dimitri? And he would say, well, it's either large scale litigation or kind of private equity mergers and acquisitions. I'm not exactly sure, but like he was very precise in terms of not only that he would be a lawyer, but like what kind of lawyer he would be and exactly what he would be working on. The punchline, as I was sort of suggesting a moment ago, is halfway through his third year, like he was almost there, he quit to become a comedian. And maybe I'll put it on my LinkedIn or put it on Twitter. There's a wonderful interview that he gave like now almost 15 years ago about that story, and he jokes about it sometimes in his comedy routines. The people said to him like, "What are you doing? Are you crazy? Like, why are you walking away from this? Like, just get your degree and then you'll always have it." And he said, "Listen, I know what I want to do. I want to do comedy. there's no point in wasting any more time sort of going down this other path, which I like. The sort of decisiveness and finality of that I really love. But anyway, that's a whole other conversation, which we can definitely talk about. But I was not like him from the perspective of like, hey, I know I can't wait. I can't wait to start billing hours and like filing briefs. And again, I think I sort of viewed law as a lot of people do, which I think is a bit of a fallacy. Maybe we can talk about this a little bit, that like you can do anything with a law degree. Um, I have strong opinions about that, but like that was definitely the Kool-Aid that my parents gave to me and that I sort of readily drank. And so I sort of kind of, I came at it from that perspective and not necessarily like, I can't wait to get my first job at my first, law firm and, bill 2,000 hours a year or whatever. Like definitely was not my gig.
Right. But it does sound like it was kind of like the family business in a sense. And,
For sure.
and that's how, you're drawn into it. Maybe not so much for like the draw
What
of
most
billing
people
by the
think
hour.
of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. Going to the courtroom, right? Like not a thing I thought about.
Yeah. And it does bring up a couple ideas that are related I want to ask you about, but I will a little bit later because I still want to get like a fuller picture of
Yeah.
you growing up. Like what was your neighborhood like? Was it the city? Was it like more of like a bedroom neighborhood, commuter? Like what was it like?
Yeah. So again, I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, and when I was 8, we moved a mile and a half. Well, it's probably more like 2 miles from a smaller house, and again, not to some giant thing, but where we lived on a cul-de-sac where there were like tons of kids and like a lot of interaction, to a house that was a little farther away, a little bit bigger, that was on a busy road but had like a lot more space. It actually had a pool.
Mm.
Um, and like I changed schools, all that, which all of that wasn't particularly like I wasn't I don't look at that as like, oh, I lost all my friends. It wasn't formative, but in terms of sort of like neighborhoods, it was a super interesting transition because I changed schools, like I changed like even like friend groups and stuff like that, even just because like it was just a different area. It was definitely, I mean, it definitely wasn't rural. The like I said, the property was a little bit larger, but that was a little bit unique, for still being within the greater kind of confines of Salt Lake City. It's actually just, for any of you who know Salt Lake City, it's actually very close to the University of Utah, like still very much within the city, not like New York City, or even today here in Seattle, we live on Capitol Hill, which is a more urban part of Seattle than I think a lot of places in the country. So yeah, I'd probably say urban/suburban.
All right. So you're there and then you end up going to BYU and you
Mhm.
you major in international studies. And I'm curious as to why that, what you learned from that experience, and if there was anyone that maybe might have been a mentor or pushed you in a certain direction or influenced you in a certain direction.
I wanted to learn about as many different things as I could. And that was sort of the best major that would enable me to do that, is the very honest short answer. I learned about economics, I learned about sociology, I learned about geography, I learned about history, I just really loved it because it had a real breadth of exposure to like different ideas. It's generally sort of worked out for me. I don't know what I'd tell my kid if he came to me and told me. I have a son in college right now and another who's going to be a senior in high school. And then I have a younger son as well. But I don't know if one of them came to me and said like, yeah, here's like, I want to do this very general but not particularly useful major. Like, what would you think? But it really had a breadth of options, that piece of it. Oh, and then I had actually spent some time in Russia. And so I did a minor in Russian as well. So I got to sort of do some language stuff too, which I think was maybe required or certainly a big chunk of.
Yeah, the breadth is awesome, and I think it definitely comes in handy, especially right now, to be able to communicate across different areas of expertise. I wanted to ask you though about Russia. Like, what was the draw there? Was it because you were studying Russian that you went out there, or like?
Yeah, so this is maybe a big piece of my youth that I sort of left out of the conversation. So I grew up a member of the Mormon Church, and I say grew up. I'm still kind of sort of affiliated. Again, longer conversation, probably not useful, but that was one of the reasons why when we moved when I was younger, it was a little bit more dramatic because there are a ton of Mormons in Salt Lake City, and your kind of local congregation ends up operating as a pretty kind of strong, and those congregations are based geographically. And so like when we moved, even like, not even that far, it totally changed like the congregation that I was affiliated with, and they were both lovely congregations, but like it just really changed my sort of world situation, which I think is maybe one of the reasons why it felt maybe more abrupt than it might have otherwise.
Yeah.
Um, but so Russia was the Mormon Church asks. At the time, it was more all young men. Now it's both young men and young women to spend 2 years on kind of a service proselytizing mission at 19. Really, basically anywhere the church chooses to send you. And so, even though I'd studied Spanish for a number of years in high school, they sent me to Russia. And so I spent 2 years from the summer of 1997 to the summer of 1999 in and around kind of an area about 500 miles southeast of Moscow, centered on a city that's called Samara. The other major cities that I spent time in that area, there's a city called Saratov, a city called Engels, and then a couple of other cities that I spent time in that area, teaching people about our religion, but also just doing a bunch of service, and picked up the language, learned what it was like to spend time in another culture, like really immerse myself in another place. Really amazing experience, but definitely also I think probably significantly informed my interest in my major when I ultimately landed on it.
Yeah. And how long were you there in Russia?
2 years.
Wow. What an amazing experience to have at that age. Because, I could definitely see, like, just from my, like, the smaller amounts of time that I spent abroad. I went on a trip with my dad when I was around 12, then one at around 14. But it's a mind expanding experience, seeing other parts of the world, because we're kind of like within our own skin, so to speak, here, and we don't see things from an outsider's perspective. And it gives you definitely, it unlocks that ability to empathize with other people more fully, I think. Then like, you took that kind of like that breadth of experience approach, and you went into a JD MBA program at Seattle University, and again, kind of like explored all of those things that you were already working on. And what was that like? Like, did you see yourself going into business at that point, or a law firm, or what were you thinking then?
Yeah, once again, not unlike the international studies major, it maybe wasn't as thought out as it should have been. But I think one of the things that the international studies major taught me was I really like intersections. Like I like places where different disciplines overlap and where you can sort of flip back and forth between two or different, even multiple perspectives on kind of a particular question. And so like that was already turning me on to the notion that like just being a lawyer or just studying law, like just honestly felt really narrowing. And so I
Mm.
wanted to be able to see the world from another angle. I actually, when I initially applied to law school, it's funny, I haven't thought about this in a long time, mostly targeted my applications to schools where I could actually do a joint degree, a JD, and a master's in international studies. Because I sort of envisioned myself doing a bunch of work like with the State Department or something like that. Anyway, didn't pan out. Long story. I'm not bitter about it. But and I will say this, I in particular had a very influential first year contracts professor, a woman by the name of Kelly Testy. I always compare her to she's the band that I caught right before they got huge. She was just my first year contracts professor, but like 2 years later, she became the dean of Seattle U, and then the law school. Then she became the dean of the University of Washington Law School here, and then she actually was running the Law School Admissions Council, which is the entity that administers the law school admissions test. She's like totally a big deal. And I really liked her. And she actually suggested, like to all of us, not even to me in specific, like, I really think you should look at the JD MBA program. And when I sort of started putting the pieces together and thinking about it, I was like, yeah, like this seems like a really interesting way to sort of augment that legal experience with, and that's the great thing about an MBA too, is like economics, finance, accounting, management, like again, very broad, not particularly useful. And so I got a bunch and as much as my dad was an entrepreneur, like he didn't really think about business in the traditional sense. So it was a really great way to sort of just like, and I know, because I know some families, like you get that over the dinner table, right? Like you dive into business cases really deeply, and that was not at all how we thought about the world. So it was a really great sort of structured introduction to, different ways of thinking about business. And I really enjoyed that in terms of, again, sort of reframing or reorienting the way I think about law school. I think, again, I sort of doubled down on the very broad and not particularly useful degree combinations because, and this is again a totally different conversation, but there aren't too many people that want a JD MBA for a wide variety of reasons. They don't hate it. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. Yeah, that was an interesting decision as well. But yeah, really loved it for, again, that sort of breadth of perspective.
You came out of law school and business school essentially as a T lawyer, right? So the thing that we talk about, like being deep within legal, but also broad within other disciplines, which you anticipated with the approach that you took. So I'll skip forward to Avo because I definitely want to, like, it seems to me like it was a perfect fit, right? Because like all of that stuff. And it's interesting, like we have these ideas of what we're going to do. Like you mentioned, maybe the State Department, international studies, like that kind of like makes sense. But at the same time, from where you were at with the background in business and the background in law, like Avo seemed like the perfect fit. So I'd love to hear how that came together.
Despite all of that, I graduated from law school and ended up just in a traditional practice setting. The other thing that I did during law school was I ended up working part-time at Microsoft. Initially full-time and then part-time. And that's a whole nother conversation. But what it really just turned me on to or got me into the headspace of was just understanding technology. Mm-hmm. And the joke, well, I guess the two jokes that I make are, at one point I was supporting Microsoft research. I was helping get patents filed. And then I would return to my desk and it was like I was walking back in time. I was seeing all of these amazing technologies. I was seeing like all, just this amazing, amazing stuff that everybody was building. And then I would go back and I was like, well, yeah, I guess I've upgraded from like, a feather quill to a word processor. But like the way I think about doing this work is just like, it hasn't really changed. And that seems strange to me that was the case. But
especially at Microsoft,
totally.
Microsoft. Yeah,
exactly. We are like, we are putting ourselves out there as like the most forward-thinking, most advanced company in the world. And yet like, this is how we do legal stuff. And I did, to be fair, I ended up being involved in a project which was really early to sending some of our patent prior art searching out to India so I was doing some international outsourcing. And then I worked with a woman, again, talking about the band that I knew before they got big, Lucy Bosley. Do you know Lucy? Lucy was running this little group called the Vendor Contracting Group, where they were processizing vendor contracting at Microsoft, trying across the whole country or across the whole company. And I actually got involved on a couple projects with her as well. So like that was the place that like some of this stuff like was born and like thinking about these things. But like I honestly didn't really even connect those ideas at the time. It was just like, oh, that's cool. This is interesting. I like the way she's thinking about that. Like, so all that being said, I ended up again for economic reasons and kind of just lack of creativity, like ending up in a traditional practice setting. And about 6 or 7 years in, I was like, I definitely know I don't like this. I got to figure out something else. And this is where the second joke comes in. Another colleague that I worked with at Microsoft for years used to say, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And like, so I was still really fascinated by less by, practicing technology law and more by how technology could affect the practice of law. And like, honestly, Tom, there's two quick lessons in here. One is I just like started doing stuff. And again, because I knew that much more about technology than the average lawyer, they saw me as some sort of kind of prophet, which was definitely not the case. But like, but I just started writing. I started like, I formed this meetup group, which was literally just like, I would love to get 6 people in a room in Seattle to talk about how technology can transform the practice of law. And it ended up being like, and again, no thanks to me, but ended up being like quite successful. I started like just engaging with people on Twitter, like, and to give you a quick shout out, one of the most pivotal moments in this transition for me was the reInvent Law event that I somehow stumbled across one Friday or whenever it was down in Silicon Valley. I didn't attend, but I was enthralled. Like everybody who tweeted about that thing, anybody who said anything about that thing, I followed them. I learned everything about them. Like I was just like, I was in. So anyway, sort of all this stuff started happening at the same time. And then here's my second lesson. Like I also started just harassing the people at the bar association about these topics. Like anybody who would talk to me, I was like, do you do a CLE about this? Like, are you interested in this? Like anything, like, will you talk to me? And Patrick Pallas, whom you know well, had just been elected as the president of the Washington State Bar Association. And he decided to sort of take up technology and innovation as one of his kind of initiatives for his time as the president of the bar. And again, I sort of joke that like he probably went to the bar and was like, hey, who do you know that are like techno interested lawyers? And the bar was like, do we have the guy for you? Like, please get him like out of our hair. They passed me off to him. And this is where we get to Avo. So I'm doing all this stuff. I'm talking. I'm like, I'm doing whatever I can. And Patrick also invited Mark Britton to serve on this commission that he put together. And I got to know Mark, and kind of long story short, I actually initially pitched Mark on like some consulting. I was like, hey, listen, I'm trying to get out of the practice of law, trying to do some other stuff. Like, would you all be interested in like working with me? And it wasn't quite this quick, but he just turned around and was like, why don't we just hire you? I was like, that's a great idea. You should totally hire me. And so again, very roundabout story, but yeah, it was this fantastic combination of my past experience, my work at Microsoft, my networking efforts with Patrick, and with the bar that sort of landed me in this place. And they happened, today in our distributed world, things are a little bit trickier, but they were here. I had known about Avo. I'd actually thought what Mark was doing was really interesting. And so I was like, yeah, this is awesome. Like what a sweet gig. So that's the roundabout story.
Well, roundabout, but that's how life is, right? It is.
Totally.
Yeah, it's kismet. It's one step leads to another step. You may not have even thought of going to that place, even though you're learning as you go. I wish more people would do that, because it is a bit scary at first, but I think that's the only way that we move forward into new things and learn, really.
One of the things I started doing at this time was I started a blog. And this was back in the Blogspot days, right? Like I went through, or Blogger, whatever it was, whatever Google's free like blogging tool was. And Tom, I was so nervous, like that. I don't know, like some of my clients would see me, talking like a legal radical, or like, I wrote, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 thousand words for this blog, like 6 or 7 different blog posts, and didn't publish a single one because I was so nervous about like putting myself out there. And of course, the crazy thing that happened was I hit publish and nothing happened. Like no one cared, no one was paying attention. Like, and it was just that, again, sort of reaffirming your like you eventually got, and for me, it was like, hey, well, I'm just going to write it, right? Like it was just like step by step, and I'm going to like slowly move my way down the path. But, yeah, it can be scary to just like sort of throw yourself out there. And I face those same fears.
But I think what's instructive for everyone listening is that you just do it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
But with that, with what you're talking about, I do want to bring up something that you wrote recently talking about blogging. Well, now you're posting on LinkedIn, and I highly recommend to everyone to check out Dan's LinkedIn post because he's been on a tear. He's been writing some series of thoughts about being a lawyer and being a lawyer who innovates. And one of the things you posted like a series of reflections. I think we're only up to 6 right now. We still have.
Oh, you're truly counting, following along. Yeah. I'm doing my top 10 sort of decade in legal tech, top 10 reflections. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's good stuff. And one of the concepts I want to talk about is this notion that you put out there about a law degree both being a map and a floor. And if you don't mind sharing that with us, what you mean by that?
Yeah, and I sort of shared that as a reflection on how letting go of a traditional legal career can be a little bit scary, if you will. And so if you're a more traditional lawyer, and that's one of the things I've learned too, Tom, is that there's probably a very strong archetype, but there's probably a very, very small number of people who fit that actual archetype because everybody's doing things differently and in their own unique way. So maybe I was a little too rigid in thinking about the world this way, but when you plug in as a typical lawyer, whether you're in-house or at a law firm or even a solo, like the path is pretty well established. You go from associate to partner, you go from whatever staff counsel to associate general counsel. Like, if you're a solo, you bill more, you handle more clients, you cost more, right? And so in that way, it's really like the path is fairly clearly established, right? Like you move down this path, you go in that way, like it's pretty clear. So it's a map, right? It gives you a pretty clear direction to go. I think it's also a floor, like just like, and I rail about this, but speaking about it from a more positive perspective, like lawyers have a monopoly on the delivery of legal services in the United States. And so for the most part, unless you stop practicing law or like lose your license or are just really, really a terrible lawyer, like you can charge more for your services than other people can, like because there's just like scarcity. And so it operates as a bit of a floor from the perspective of like again, unless you really screw things up, you're always going to do pretty well for yourself. And so when I left the practice of law to kind of, carve my own path in legal technology, I threw the map out and I lost the floor. And I'm totally okay with that. But like now I'm competing with people who, some of them didn't even graduate from college, which again is like totally cool. Super smart people who are very effective and like really good at what they do. And like, you don't have to have a license to practice business. You just jump in and start doing stuff. And so you lose some of those things that are maybe feel like a little bit more secure. At least I felt like I did when I kind of took that leap into uncertainty.
And related to that, another thought that you mentioned there was the idea of, I guess, when leaving, the strictures of being a practicing lawyer, it does open up the possibility of being the interesting client.
Yeah. So I stole this one from Charlie Munger, who actually I think passed away not too long ago, but he was Warren Buffett's like lifelong investment and business partner. And the story he tells is, yeah, he had been practicing law for a number of years, and his observation was, I realized that I didn't want to work with all of these interesting clients. I wanted to be them. And I had that same realization, Tom, and it's as clear to me now as it ever was. And maybe again, this is where to tie it back to my childhood, right? Like I always just saw my parents doing such interesting things, like things that I thought were meaningful and impactful in the world. Um, and I realized, like, as a lawyer, and this is no disrespect, like there are amazing lawyers out there who do this and do it well and fill like a super important need in the world. But those people are helping others achieve their goals, right? Or avoid um consequences for potentially bad decisions that they've made. And I was like, I want to be that person who's achieving the goals. I don't want to be the one who's, the other way I used to put it is like lawyers help people kind of use the law to get from A to B. And I was like, actually, I want to rethink the whole ecosystem, right? That just really resonated with me. Like, I want to be the one kind of hiring lawyers and having them help direct me instead of, being brought in to just consult on one piece or another.
What would you say is the verdict on moving on from being a practicing lawyer? Is it overall like a good experience? And what would you say about that?
Yeah, it's too bad that how much time do you have? I mean, the funny thing, Tom, is when I left, I felt like I burned the boats. Not in a bad way, but just like never going back, right? Like this is the path. I'm on it. Um, and so it's hard for me to like really like wind it back and be like, well, if I had done it differently, like how would I have ended up different? How would things have ended up differently, or what would I have done? Oh, here's what I like. I guess a couple of observations. One is I have been so impressed by how, I mean, you are a prime example, how entrepreneurial lawyers can be within sort of the more, or at least looking like that more traditional sort of legal career, right? Like for me, it was almost like trying to break out of something or shrugging something off. But man, there are so many smart entrepreneurial lawyers and legal professionals out there that I do wonder, like, could that have been a path for me? And I'm pretty happy with with the way things have turned out. So I don't have a lot of complaints. I do love kind of charting my own course and having the map be blank and broad in front of me. The other thing though that I've learned is I now have and it's taken me a long time to get to this point, and I don't know what we do about the profession in this regard. I've now spent so much time away from the practice of law. I now understand the lawyer's role within at least a business setting so much more effectively, so much better than I did like just with that narrow perception of like what I did as a legal professional. And I do feel like if I had to go back, both kind of armed with this notion of entrepreneurism, as well as this better perception of kind of how legal professionals can be more effective, I think I'd be a better lawyer. And I think there are ways I could enjoy it more. I love what I have done and what I do. And I feel like super, super fortunate. I've met amazing people like you and Patrick. And I mean, that's a whole nother conversation, is just like all of the fascinating people that I've had the amazing pleasure of getting to know and consider friends. People who, again, I think much more are like me than maybe the folks in more traditional practice. So I feel pretty positive about it, but it's hard to like really take myself back to that young lawyer in the early sort of 2010s and be like, what if I tried to stick it out? It's super hard for me to do that.
Well, I'm glad to hear, because I think, like, I think everyone should take a lesson from the choices you made and what you've done, because it shows that when you are a bit brave and you follow your authentic self, that it leads to a good place. You'll get there. And So as far as giving, everyone a bit of a tip that can help them out in terms of how they balance everything getting there, one of the questions I ask all of my guests is, with all the irons in the fire, how do you keep things balanced? Like, keep a work-life balance. Is there one?
I guess for me, there are kind of two pieces that are pretty significant. One is that my folks and my dad in particular, and he worked a lot, but as busy as he was, he always made time for us. And so that was just like that was, and I have, as I mentioned, I have kids now. That was like it was just non-negotiable for me. Like, and yeah, I've missed birthday parties, I've missed soccer games, like that happens. But like me being around, me prioritizing their lives, that was just the way it was going to be, and I'm really grateful for that. Like I just there's just not a world in which I see the world differently. And then I also happened to marry someone who is also really committed to family, and so she also like really helps keep me grounded in that regard. So I don't have like I don't have tips. And who knows, like my kids may still end up super screwed up. I feel like we did a pretty good job, but I don't know. But that was like for me, it was just like it's non-negotiable. And again, like I said, I travel a fair bit. I don't, like I said, I've missed things, but like being a part of their lives and like having them know me and know that I'm there was really important to me.
Yeah, I think, it's not a tip or trick, but it is values, like having certain values and priorities. And it sounds like you've been true to yours, which
Yeah.
kind of leads into the last question. The last question is, when you're doing all of this and everything that you've done in your career, like what makes it worthwhile for you?
And this maybe is the answer to your question about, if you were to run it all back, do you feel like you made the right decision? I absolutely feel like, and again, this is something like whether it was my dad working on education or on the environment or my mom working on education, it was important to me to at least try to have an impact. And again, because I have kids and have things that happen outside of my work life, there's probably more of an impact that I could have made. But I feel like I did take that risk and I picked something where I thought I could make a difference. And I'm still trying to do that. And that piece of it does make me like feel good, like maybe I'm just chipping away at this, massive boulder, and the difference that I made won't be all that apparent to anyone who comes after me. But I can say, hey, listen, I tried, and I tried based upon the best combination of tools and expertise and opportunity that I had in front of me at the time. And and this is really important to me too, I can turn around to my kids, and I happen to have boys. So it's not that I wouldn't turn to my girls. I just don't have girls. I can turn to my boys and say, hey, listen, this is the choice I made, and here are the reasons that I made those choices. And you can totally make different choices, but here's why it mattered and like felt good to me. And like, I feel like I had, some modicum of an impact on the world in a way that maybe if I had different values or made different choices that I wouldn't have had.
Well, it's a great story of devotion and giving it your all, you know? And I think you have.
And that's that's the thing, Tom, is like, I'm in my late 40s. I still feel like I'm just getting started. Like, I still feel like there's so much left to do, and I'm in a much better position to do it. So watch this space. More to come, I hope.
Well, for everyone who has been listening and watching, they want to learn more about you and InfoTrack, like how can they keep in touch with you?
Absolutely. So I used to spend a lot of time on Twitter. I don't spend as much time there anymore. I still call it Twitter. Yeah, sorry. I'm at Right Brain Law is my handle. But as Tom said, I've been spending a lot of time on LinkedIn lately. So that's probably the best place to hit me up. And I'm pretty easy to find I think I even got one of those fancy custom URLs. So I'm like linked.in or whatever.com/Dan Lear. You can find me pretty easily. But if you look up Dan Lear in Seattle and legal, you're gonna find me pretty easily. So that's probably the best place to catch me.
Dan, thank you so much for spending time with me. It was a pleasure to get to know you better and to share your story with the audience.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Again, if people want to pick my brain or have questions, like love to chat with them. So thanks again for the opportunity.
Well, thank you. And thank you all so much for watching. Really appreciate you. And we're going to have more podcasts as we come along the weeks. And it was a pleasure to talk to Dan today. And I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. That's it for now. See you next week.
Thank you so much for watching the latest episode of the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. To keep in the loop about upcoming episodes, please subscribe to LawDroid Manifesto and you'll get notified. Thanks for watching. See you next time.